Thank you, friends. Shabbat Shalom. And happy Mother's Day to all you wonderful mothers out there. I know it's actually a little ahead of Mother's Day. Here it is Wednesday evening, and I'm recording this week's episode of the show, and hopefully I can get it loaded, uh, later tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. Anyhow, I received an email from a dear friend the other day, and it was fantastic. It was called "What Happens in Heaven When We Pray?" And she prefaced it by saying that she wasn't pushing God. And I looked at that and I said, wow, what a strange thing to say. And then, I read the email and I spoke to her about it. And she said this because she was afraid that, when you mention God, people think that you're pushing things on them. So her preface of saying that, she wasn't pushing God was because we fear judgment that we get from others. And when we say things about God, we think we're inviting judgment. Friends, don't worry about the judgment of others. Worry instead about whether you're judging. Well, this email is about someone who's dreaming they went to heaven and were being shown around by an angel. I'm a great believer in angels. And, in worlds of light, whether you call it heaven, whatever it is you want to call it. And a number of years ago, I was taught by the Cherokee Indians down south and by the Cree Indians up north how to do soul retrieval journeys. And in doing them, you often go to a light world that's probably inhabited by angels, but that's another story. This email was describing what seemed like an assembly line. And in heaven, there is a receiving room where all the petitions to God are received and sorted. And it was really busy with angels going all over the place to work on all of these requests. And I have to admit, as I read it, I pictured Santa's workshop. You move further down the line to the packaging and delivery sections where the blessings were being processed, and it too was extremely busy. And then you go further down the line, and there's this very small little station with only one angel, and it was the acknowledgement section. And nothing was happening here. And the angel said, well, I'm really sorry, but nothing happens here because after people receive their blessings, very few send back acknowledgments. Friends, I love this email. It doesn't take much to say thank you. We have so much in our lives that we should be grateful for, and so many people that we care about and who care about us. Say thank you. Say I love you. Say I care. It doesn't have to be to anyone in particular. Say it out loud to the universe. The message will get out. It was marvelous, simply marvelous. And I like to thank you all for joining me. One of these days, and it won't be long, going down in the valley and sing my song. I will sing it loud and sing it strong. Let the echo decide if I was right or wrong. Friends, don't be afraid to give thanks. Some weeks we may talk about more things and some weeks less. It's the wonder of an organic book that speaks to you differently each time. I thought this week would be like actually a less week, and it's actually going to turn out to be a bit of a more week. And that isn't restricted to whether it's the Torah or the Bible. Most great works will speak to you differently each time. Whether it's books, whether it's music, whether it's art, or whether it's film, great works inspire great things because they inspire great thoughts. And friends, thoughts are things. Our thoughts set in motion great action. It is our kavanot, our intentions, that set the world in motion. You have an infinite capacity to create. If you wondered what it meant that man was created in God's image, you certainly need wonder no more, because your ability to create is infinite. We are connected by our thoughts, not our actions. Action is simply the manifestation of what you set in motion. It's the final part of the creation process. We do feel each other's pain. We do feel each other's joy. Imagine if we hadn't disconnected ourselves from our feelings and our connections to each other still allowed us to symbiotically be part of each other. And we do get those feelings when we hear a story from someone, when we hear a song, when we see the tragedy of children in Nigeria taken to be sold as slaves. After the tragic accidental death of his 4-year-old son, Eric Clapton sang about tears in heaven. Thousands of years ago, Virgil wrote in the Aeneid, Sunt lacrimae rerum, there are tears for things, and what men suffer touches the human heart. We are connected, and books often form the passageways that connect us. And as you can tell, music often does it. For me, I use it a lot. And who'd have ever thought that some of the references I find in some songs make them greater than they seemed for what they speak to 30, 40, 50 years later. At 16, she quit high school to make her fortune in the promised land. She got a job behind the counter in an all-night hamburger stand. She wrote faithfully home to Mama, now Mama, don't you worry none. From small things, Mama, big things one day come. I'll never forget that song. Yes, it's true, Dave Edmonds, from small things, big things one day come. I'm still learning the wonders of this electronic world, and I have a great desire for there to be more interactivity between us. Tell me it's your birthday coming up, and we can point to why this may be a significant parsha for your year. Say who's ill, and we can send healing energy together. Say who passed, and we can honor their life. We are a community, friends, of like-minded spirits on a soul journey, not limited by dogma. And this book we are reading, it was a small thing, Leviticus, but it serves as a design for a society of people who help one another, who do not intentionally hurt or injure one another, who respect each other's property and relationships, who assemble and celebrate together, who acknowledge their mistakes and atone for them, who regard life as sacred, whether animal or human, who pursue purity, who respect the law and dignity, and who are loyal to one divinity. It is about bringing together the ritual and the ethical, not to justify, but to unify and support. And in this week's Parsha, Behar in the mountain, it's another one of those usually read as a double Parsha, normally read in conjunction with next week's Bechukotai. And they're the last two Parshas of Leviticus, and this year they're separated. And you'll be glad, because next week's Parsha, By My Laws, focuses on an incredible list of blessings and curses, which can get lost when grouped together with this one. And there's so many things in each of these that may grab you. This Parsha opens with a very strange juxtaposition of announcing the location, Mount Sinai, and the year of release. Rashi and many of the great rabbis puzzled over this. And it's actually only recently that scholars have begun to realize that there is an invocation of a typical Mesopotamian practice in which a king, assuming his throne, issues a proclamation for the release of slaves. And we have God announcing his kingship at Sinai, releasing the Israelites from their slavery in Egypt. But they in effect instead become slaves to God. It's a fascinating parsha. We are told that the land shall take a Sabbath, and we discovered last week that's a cessation. And we are presented with the Jubilee year, a return. And friends, the word Jubilee means return. And it entered English via the Hebrew word Yovel, which was actually a synonym for the word shofar, because the sound of the shofar announced the Yovel year. For the most part, we simply take it to mean a 50th anniversary, and we think of it in terms of the Queen. I think the Queen just recently celebrated her Jubilee year. But what does it mean biblically? Well, it means every 50 years, the Jubilee year, the land goes back to its original owners. This was designed to prevent a feudal system from developing in Israel. You see, everyone was to be given land. And every 50 years, it returns to where it once began. Get back, get back, get back to where you once belonged. In the law of Jubilee, the return of property prevented a class of wealthy landowners at the top and a mass of landless peasants at the bottom. And you will see in Numbers the crucial apportionment of land to everyone. It opens with a census for that reason. And God commands that every 50th year, the system returns to where it started. Okay, maybe we don't follow everything that God said. But you see, friends, land is inalienable. Individuals can suffer difficult times, but there is a divinely decreed limit to loss. And the society can never degenerate into a two-tiered system of haves and have-nots. Okay, it's not supposed to degenerate into that kind of a society. We are told in Leviticus 25:19 that we shall live in security on the land. And as I read this parsha, friends, I realized that what it was talking about was us as caretakers. We caretake those in our lives whom we love. And sometimes it's because they need us to caretake for them. We caretake each other. We caretake our possessions, our pets, ourselves, and we usually put ourselves last. But our ultimate job is caretaking this planet, which in this parsha God tells us belongs to God. But the land shall not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, because you are aliens and visitors with me. The land is God's. We are simply visitors, friends. Actually, everything you have, you are simply caring for until it's time for it to go to somebody else. I recently gave a special ring to someone. It's from the 16 or 1700s, and it was a Middle Eastern tribal ring. And it was designed for couples to put their stamp on their marriage contract and other important documents. My time as its caretaker had ended, and it was time to move on for somebody else to care for it. And sometimes we keep things until we die, and we thought we owned them. We own nothing. We are caretakers. And some do a more careful job than others. You are aliens and visitors with me. And friends, as caretakers, we actually have a very special duty of care to our brothers, especially when they are faced with hardships. And there are 3 levels talked about in this parsha. When your brother will be low, it says. And in the first instance, if he had to sell his land, it is to be redeemed for him in the Jubilee year, the return year. In the second instance, if he had to sell his land and he now has no money, we must lend him money without interest. And in the third instance, he is sold or sells himself into servitude. And we have a hard time understanding that, but it was a different time then, and you could sell yourself into servitude. We must never treat him as a slave. At each step, friends, we are ordered to help. We are not just caretakers for God's garden, but we are to care for each other. And the rule is that as one's brother's needs increase, the greater your responsibility to help them. And we are all brothers and sisters. Together we'll stand, divided we'll fall. Come on now, people, let's get on the ball and work together. Come on, let's work together. Because together we will stand, every boy, every girl, and man. An unfortunate Israelite, and remember, we talked about this before, an Israelite is someone who struggles with God, as do we all, need never feel degraded. Economic hard times were a reality of life, and for many they still are. The system required brothers to help each other. There was no need for pity, and you were specifically forbidden from treating a human like an animal. All of these laws have ethical and moral components in their inclusion. How many laws today do? I don't know. I don't think too many. I have always had a really difficult time with the concept of Hebrews, or for that matter, anyone else owning and participating in slavery. The elimination of slavery, my friends, has unfortunately been a slow process and not a revolution. Israelites were allowed slaves. We talked of it last week and we see it this week. But not in the manner of the Egyptians. They cannot overwork them. They cannot mistreat them. They must be treated with dignity and humanity. And we actually see the establishment that a slave has rights, which was a necessary step towards its opposition. But slavery is simply wrong. And after seeing how God intended us to be caretakers, this is another law which we simply never got right. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls. For the times, they are a-changin'. Free the people. Shabbat shalom, and thank you for joining me, friends. And mothers, have an absolutely magnificent Mother's Day. Blessings to you all.